from the heart of Dubai, where tomorrow is being built today, to the world. Welcome to the CTO Show with Mehmet. Here, we redefine technology and reimagine possibilities. With Mehmet, delve into the riveting realms of AI, cybersecurity, and digital technology. Experience the thrilling highs and lows of startups. Immerse yourself in the spirit of entrepreneurship and witness the future of business innovation being written in real time. Now, without further ado, let's tune in and explore the future.
Hello and welcome back to a new episode of the CTO Show with Mehmet. Today I'm very pleased. Joining me, RJ Kedziora. RJ, thank you very much for joining me here today. The way, as I was explaining to you before we started, I like my guests to introduce themselves, tell us a little bit more about, your journey, what you're currently up to, and then we can start taking conversation from there. We're gonna talk about health and AI a lot today. I know this for a fact, but before we do this, I will keep the floors to you to introduce yourself.
Yes, health and AI is an amazing topic these days. So much interest, as you can imagine, as the listeners can imagine. My name is RJ Kedziora. I'm co-founder, COO, CTO of a company called Estenda Solutions. Got our start with a good friend, Drew Lewis, back in 2003, so a little over 2 decades now. We are an ISO 13485 certified professional services organization focused on data-related projects, custom software development, data analytics, and AI. If you have data, we can help you. And we work with a mix of large Fortune 50 medical device companies, smaller startups, helping them, develop solutions very much on the patient-focused side. We've never done anything with the billing data or anything like that. I don't find that interesting. And that's why I started this company, to, work on interesting, challenging projects. My background, I came up through the software development ranks. I was lucky in the late 80s as personal computing became a thing, to have a computer at home, and I played my fair share of games. Don't get me wrong, I played a lot of games, but I really enjoyed getting into even programming and what can I do with this technology back then. And went to college in the early 90s for comp sci. And interestingly, as AI is such a hot topic now, when I was going into college in the early 90s, my goal was to get a PhD in artificial intelligence.
Wow.
It's one of those things that people forget. It's been around for a while. It's not something that's new. And what happened is I got a job offer as I was getting ready to graduate college, and I was like, do I take on more debt or go out into the working world and earn a living? So I went out into the working world and started earning a living, but always had my hand in the areas of AI and expert systems and things of that nature before we got to, the Gen AIs that were there. But, worked my way through the ranks, worked in various different consulting companies, quickly realized while technology is important, it is much more about the people and the processes and what we do. And that sort of propelled my career over the years to make, realize that difference, and how do you apply the technologies to problem solving and challenges. So today, 20 years into the journey at Estenda Solutions, which is an amazing, mix of those still software development, custom software projects, but much more heavily focused on, how do we use AI? And lots of questions around, the use of Gen AI these days. What everybody's interested in because it's making an impact in the world.
That's fantastic. Just out of curiosity, RJ, because you mentioned impact, have you decided to focus on the digital health innovation because we can see the impact on humans much faster than maybe other fields in technology? What exactly was the motive? I mean, to focus on that, and also I like what you said about AI. I'm gonna come to AI, but how have you seen this field, specifically digital health, evolved over the last, I would say, 20 years or so?
Yeah, it's been an amazing journey. I've worked on, prior to Estenda, developed accounting systems, inventory management systems. Even there was a sort of famous railroad car scheduling system years ago. I used to work at U.S. Steel, and as they were producing the steel, and I worked in the tubular division, where they made pipes, and you needed railroad cars in the right place at the right time. And interestingly, it was mainframe programming, so it was not an AI-driven system, but very, expert rule-based of how we get those railroad cars in the right place. Interesting challenges, interesting work. You need those inventory systems. You need those accounting systems. But with digital health, there is that sense of giving back. As we've developed solutions over the years, and I've talked to the doctors and nurses, the educators that have used systems we've helped develop. There's just a lot of those stories of like, we were using your software and we caught, this particular incident, and we're really able to help this patient. So lots of those just sort of individual stories. But then also, as we develop these solutions, very much, cutting edge innovation kind of thing, they have to go through clinical trials. Do they actually work? It's one thing for me and a doctor, to say, hey, yeah, this is going to work. You really got to test it. So we also have, PhDs on staff to help drive those clinical trials and actually do the proper research to make sure that solutions work. And if they don't, then, you adjust them and you take another shot at it. So yeah, it's been fascinating. The second part of your question is, what's changed in 20 years?
Right.
That's probably a whole nother podcast of just what has changed in 20 years. It boils down to data. So much of our life and what we do is about data. And 20 years ago, getting access to the data was a lot more challenging. And there wasn't a lot of data, which was interesting. Healthcare is, I think of it as the last industry to really embrace data. They've embraced technology. Look at the MRIs and the imaging technology that's out there, and just the ability to create new drugs and do that research, different methods for surgery, and, amazing things in terms of technology that the industry has created and continues to create. But we're still wrapping our heads around the idea of data and how to manage that. So think back to the early 2000s, pre-mobile phone, pre-Facebook, pre any of these things kind of thing, which is interesting for the start. And EMRs were not mandated here in the US. They were not frequently used. We were fortunate to get our start working with, military healthcare and the Veterans Association here in the US, which did use electronic medical records. But early on, as we were trying to extract data from those systems, it'd be like, here's this database, good luck. Find what information you did, and then, how well was it coded? Today, almost every enterprise health system out there has an EMR, has data. I'll say it's easier to get the data today, but there's still a lot of challenges. And one of the big changes in healthcare is the advent of what's called the FHIR protocols, FHIR, Fast Healthcare Interoperability Resources. And it's basically an API. To boil it down, it's an API to interact with your electronic medical record to get data out of the system. And what that API methodology enables, and that shift over these last 20 years, is so many more developers understand how to use an API to get the data, as opposed to, methods that were used before then, and, still in use today. But there's also still challenges in getting that data. How is it coded? You think of your banking data, and you can go anywhere in the world and access your information and your money. It is simpler money, financials, than, healthcare data is, but it is still very much of a challenge of how that data is coded in one system versus another. And the other aspect of data is just the invention of all the different wearables that are on the market now, to be able to track information about what's going on in your body. Your Apple Watch now can track, your heart rate and all sorts of metrics, or you can wear a ring. Continuous glucose meters. You used to finger stick, 20 years ago was the current state of the art for helping somebody if they have diabetes, understanding their blood glucose. Very much
Mhm.
point in time. Now you have continuous glucose meters that take a reading every minute. So you really have this fine-tuned look at what's going on inside of your body. And they're just continually innovating now. So if anything, doctors, healthcare practitioners are probably getting overwhelmed with the information that is available now.
Right. So before I jump to the AI, because I think this is the base for the question of the AI. I mean, before I start the discussion about AI and what's happening in the field of healthcare, but again, the base is the data, as you said. Now, you mentioned that maybe it's one of the verticals, I would say, or like the domains that they have lots of data, right? But it's, I think, maybe probably the healthcare is considered one of the highly privacy and governance um you know constrained vertical in the domain of digital technology, of course, because we talk about sensitive data, we talk about patients, maybe some critical and very private data that it's there. Um so managing patient data, how much it is critical and how much is important for organizations to not only you before utilizing the data itself, so to really safeguard it and make sure that they are compliant with. And of course, the first thing that comes to mind when you talk healthcare is the HIPAA, right? So
Yes.
walk me through that, RJ, especially for maybe the folks who are new to this field and new to this domain.
Yeah, and absolutely. So it starts with privacy of data. And if you're in the EU, it's GDPR. Here in the US, the FTC has purview over just the general privacy of your data. So you always want to make sure that your information is secure, particularly if you have like your billing information, credit card information, here in the US, social security numbers, kind of, you need to protect that, you first and foremost. Now we made the jump to healthcare in that data set and HIPAA. And here in the US, HIPAA is the privacy legislation around protecting health information. So I don't know. In my mind, it's not any more difficult than protecting data in other areas. It's just more sensitive. So you do want to be able to, lock that down. Any system you help create, you're going to start with, a zero-based trust system, and build from the ground up. Security is the first thing you got to think about when you're developing the system. But it's about access and use of the data. So, when you look at GDPR, it's the same thing. It's in HIPAA, they're not preventing you from using the data. It's designed to make transparent and let the owner of that data, the patient or just the person in general, when you're talking about GDPR, be aware of how that data is going to be used and consent to that. And that's really the core of that. And at HIPAA, a lot of people historically have used it to be like, oh, I can't give you that data, and have used HIPAA as a barrier or as a reason for not sharing information. But that was never the intent of the HIPAA legislation. It was to protect the data, but to promote sharing and make healthcare and the transaction of healthcare easier. Today, more recent legislation has, put penalties in place if you are what you call information blocking nowadays. So really, the government's really trying to push the idea of that information sharing and getting that data out in the world and making it much more usable across everybody. Because the more that data can be usable, the better off you can be. But yes, the privacy, the security protection of that information has to be paramount. One of the interesting things I learned, a while ago, in the black market, you think about credit card information or your health card information. Health information is more valuable in the black market than credit card information is. And then you can go after and get drug prescriptions and do all sorts of things with that information that you can't just do with the credit card information. So yeah, you do have to absolutely first protect that. And I mentioned, I started, answering your question of referencing the FTC here in the US. That's one of the things is we talk to startups. If you're, say create a new ring to measure metrics or a new watch to measure, metrics in your body, if you're not sharing it with healthcare practitioners, there's no healthcare practitioner or health organization in that picture, HIPAA doesn't come into play, because HIPAA is first and foremost about that healthcare practitioner. But you are still bound by privacy regulations under the FTC. So I've had these conversations where like, oh, we don't have to worry about privacy. I'm like, yes, you do. You still have to worry about privacy. You still have to worry about security. Protect the data of your users. Like if you get breached, you're not going to have happy customers. So, you do have to protect it no matter what.
Absolutely. So, and the reason I kept this conversation with this flow, because again, now we're coming to the, let's say, one of the main topics that we want to discuss with you, RJ, today, which is AI and generative AI specifically in healthcare. And thank you very much for, I like, to remind people that AI didn't start with ChatGPT. AI have been around since the 1950s,
Yeah.
when they did the first conference ever, right? So in their mouth. And um, but of course, what happened, I think in November 2022 forward, that was almost 2 years now.
Yeah.
So the world is not same as it was before that, because of course, OpenAI's release to the public ChatGPT. Now, here's the question, RJ. So first, what were your impressions when you start to see, ChatGPT rolling out and having all these use cases? And what kind of use cases that you start to think immediately about that can be applied to healthcare?
Yeah, and it is. It's amazing where we've come in just 2 short years. When it first came to market and where we are today, it has advanced. It's gotten better, multimodal capabilities where you can create videos. I think the biggest thing in terms of where we are today, there was. I'm sure listeners are familiar with Oprah. And I'm sure she's world famous. Oprah had a special on AI and Gen AI about 2 weeks ago as we record this kind of thing. If Oprah's talking about it, it's a thing. And she had Bill Gates on, founder of Microsoft, another very famous gentleman kind of thing. And Bill Gates said in his lifetime, generative AI is the most amazing technology he's seen. Over everything he did, over the smartphone, over the internet, generative AI is the game changer for the market. You put it up there right there with, the printing press and electricity, invention of the internet, smartphones kind of thing. It's that game changing. We're going to see a difference in the world. And what's interesting is it's happening faster and faster, which is probably the biggest challenge of where we are in terms of progress of technology. The internet made a difference in the world. Smartphones made a difference. Social media have made a difference in the world. Some can argue for the better or worse, kind of thing. So Gen AI is now making an impact on the world. And if we look at healthcare specifically, it gets really interesting. And I just love the use cases and the potential for what is possible. So think about a doctor today, nurse, a healthcare practitioner that is taking care of a patient, maybe for 20 years, or the individual has, a chronic illness or God forbid cancer, and how are they going to treat that patient? So one, there's just so much medical information now available in this person. And we reference the wearables. There's so much more data and information about what's going on with that patient in between office visits. And that's not just when they come to the office, what's their blood pressure, what's their heart rate, when they come into the office. It's like, what's been happening, between those office visits. So AI first can take all of that information and make sense of it, and can summarize that information and provide that, to the physician, to the healthcare practitioner. Here in the US, we're challenged with our private healthcare system, where doctors, need to see patients, sometimes it's, they only have 7 or 8 minutes with a patient. That's not a lot of time. And to drive into an electronic medical record and find the pieces of information that are interesting, it's hard. So let's use the power of AI and the technology, which leads us to the second component of this is, with the advent of the EMR, they were not designed to be really usable, not designed to be part of like a patient encounter. They were designed for capturing information and billing purposes. You talk to 10 doctors, if you talk to 10 doctors, 10 of them are going to say, I don't like my EMR. They're just not well liked. Doctors, nurses, healthcare professionals did not get into medicine to sit there and type on a computer. They got there to help people, to make a difference in the world. And so as EMRs have become more prevalent, and you go, I've experienced this, you go to your doctor and they're sitting there talking to you, but, for the most part, they're staring at the computer and typing. Some institutions, a lot of places that have brought in like medical scribes to help that. So then the doctor's not typing that information. But now in terms of a use case for the generative AI that's proliferating pretty quickly in the industry is the idea of ambient listening and note taking. And you see it in your Teams and your go-to meetings, your Zoom calls, kind of thing, all these technologies that are doing that. It's listening and transcribing those notes. And so that's, I think, of like the second really quickly use of Gen AI that's being realized. And so now you have those two combinations. Gen AI can, surface what's information is important. It can listen to the actual, conversation. And what's interesting, it does things, it makes, it's, aware of what's going on. And one of the anecdotal stories that I've heard a couple of times now is just, patient talks about, when they go to bed at night, their legs are restless and they have trouble falling asleep. So, they take a shot of whiskey. Now, not the best medical thing to do. But the key is that the ambient listening technology doesn't translate that word for word. It translates to patient self-medicates, which is a much more standard accepted terminology. So it makes that shift in how it, transcribes those notes. It's adding value to that conversation. And both of those use cases are very low risk in the grand scheme of things, which I think is important as we embark on this journey of using Gen AI, particularly in healthcare, because of the stakes. You're dealing with the health and wellness of people. So you have those two things happening today, which I find really interesting. I'm waiting, I've said this in a couple different sessions now and in conferences that I've been, talking about. I'm waiting for the combination of those two things together to come together, where the AI is listening, is aware of the patient's history, and is aware of the medical knowledge out there, and can surface questions. I think today surface those questions to the physician or the healthcare practitioner, so that they can ask the patient. So if it's all of a sudden aware of, oh, here's these combination of factors, maybe it means X. Here's some questions you should ask the patient to help them out. Because the other aspect of medical knowledge is there's just so much information that is generated every day in the medical field. You cannot keep up with it. Humans cannot keep up with it. So use the powers of technology to do that. Likewise, humans are not perfect. So how can we use the computers to double check and provide additional information the patient. So they're the biggest use cases out there today that are proliferating, pretty quickly across the industry.
Plenty of I would say promising use cases is uh, you know and I think the sky is the limit, RJ, right? Because um I had like a couple of people on the show, and they were all like, they are all professional, doctors themselves. And, the way they are thinking about it is really fascinating because it's not only about, how it can help in the diagnostics and, for example, in, you know, the kind of what we know about generative AI, but also like empowering people who cannot or they don't have access to proper healthcare system where generative AI, of course, it will not replace a proper doctor, but at least it can do the first first frontier job, I would say, kind of, right? So it's really fascinating to see how far we've came. Um, you know, I've spoken to people, also in the pharmaceutical industry, and they're telling me how fast now they can try to get a new drug, for example, for certain diseases. And this is really, like it's simple power, right? So plenty and plenty of options that we have here. Now, um, question to you: do you think that the healthcare industry is ready for this leap? Are they ready for it?
I,
Because, and I'll tell you my theory, RJ. Correct me if I'm wrong. Like healthcare is one of the, and it's not nothing wrong with them. I know because we were just discussing about the privacy and all this, but historically, healthcare are known to be like kind of like not early adopters, not even like with the mass. They are like the people who comes at the end. So tell me more.
they are not the early adopters, and I'd love to say they're ready for it. Probably not. No. Is any industry ready for the impact of Gen AI? Probably not. Um, the challenge in healthcare is the stakes of being wrong are so much bigger. So we all know Gen AI makes up facts from time to time, and they're called hallucinations.
Hmm.
And if you're generating marketing content, eh, not, and something makes it through because you still need a human to read the materials, or just push it out there into the world. It's it's not that bad. There's been stories of where a car dealership has uses Gen AI to talk to customers, and it agreed to selling a car for like $0. And okay, that's not great, but it's not hurting your life, or maybe having a medical impact. And so healthcare does have to be a little more cautious than other industries. So I understand that idea of hesitation, but we also have to embrace it. There are not enough physicians, there are not enough healthcare practitioners here in the US, if the world, you know. In the US, we have an obesity crisis, we have a mental health crisis. There are not enough professionals to treat the people that need the help. So we need to use the power of technology to meet the patients where they are, to provide that care for those in need. Technology, as we know, is very scalable. So, and there are people creating, mental health systems to help with all sorts of issues, but not even just help, identify. This, we were talking about, the idea of ambient listening. Various different companies are creating AI solutions, not strictly Gen AI, but AI machine learning systems that can listen to how you talk, can listen to your cough to diagnose tuberculosis, can listen to just this conversation and be like, hey, are you okay? Are you depressed? Can look at that type of information to better understand where you are in your life. And okay, now there's a point of inflection. Hey, you should go, seek out a medical professional. Or if you are under a physician's care, it can be a note to the physician to be like, hey, next time you see this patient, or maybe you should, reach out to this patient and check in on them. You can monitor people much more closely like that in a very beneficial way. So yes, I think that the healthcare industry needs to embrace this technology from that aspect, from the aspect of just making mistakes and doing better. There's a lot of talk about ethics. Ethics is interesting in
Right.
in healthcare. And what I find interesting is so many organizations are creating ethical guidelines around AI. I'm like, well, those ethical guidelines exist already. Why do we need another set of ethical guidelines? Physicians are famous for first, do no harm. It's like, there's the core of your ethical guideline. You don't need another thing to like tell you that. It's like, do no harm. But I flipped that on its head. Do we have an ethical requirement to use this technology to help those people in need? Because we can't reach out to all of them. We know we can provide the necessary care to all the people that need it. So I like flipping it on its head and saying we need to embrace this technology. We need to use it and get it out there.
100%, I agree with you on this, RJ, because it's not like a kind of a luxury product that yeah, we can use it, like we can do something good. Like it's not like kind of a cosmetic operation that we're gonna apply for someone to look better. It's something that maybe it's gonna say, not maybe, we are sure, because we started to hear these stories, we start to see these proofs that using AI, machine learning, not only generative AI is, yeah, it's one part of it, like which can in between just between like brackets, I would say, talk to people in a sense, give them information. Of course, they need to, as you mentioned, take care from the hallucinations that can, happen, which is, by the way, people are working, people in the AI domain are working hardly on, reducing the amount of hallucination that can happen. So this is work in progress. But yeah, I agree with you, RJ. Like we need to embrace it and utilize it, because, and by the way, it's not only a US problem, just because I have a global audience. So I think, and not I think, I also, again, like we discussed this on the show. It's a global epidemic, which is stress, which is people feeling overwhelmed, mental health. All these are like a global epidemics, as we can call them, and AI is indeed one of the many technologies that we might be able to use to help us somehow. Of course, we're gonna see how things gonna progress, but I'm positive on this part. Now, you mentioned something just a couple of minutes ago, RJ, regarding when we were discussing the data and the privacy. But I want to ask you from a different perspective, the wearable devices, right? So we know about the ring, we know about like many products. So something that can track our sleep, some they track the blood, some and so on and so forth. Um, what are, in your opinion, the next big things in that domain, especially because we're talking about sensors that kind of take the data, record it, and then feed it to the AI, right? So what are some of the trends you're seeing currently in the wearable device technology?
Wow, interesting. I can tell you the new thing that I just used for the first time today, a little bit unusual. I raced triathlons, and so I jumped in the swimming pool today. Got a pair of goggles um, that have a built-in heart rate sensor and have a display on the lens of the goggles, so I can see my heart rate in real time, and it counts my stroke. So it's very physical activity, exercise oriented. But to be able to sit there and swim laps for half an hour, and it's showing me my heart rate, tracking my laps, tracking my strokes, per, 25 meters that I was swimming kind of thing, tracking my head angle, so that I had better form was just, as a triathlete was just amazing for me to see that. It definitely was distracting, something I'm gonna have to get used to seeing that information. But it demonstrates the proliferation of this technology and how it can be used in different areas to better understand what's going on. CGM, continuous glucose monitors, have been around for a while now. But what's interesting about those is various different manufacturers have now created versions for people without diabetes. So normal people without diabetes can wear these devices and better understand what happens in terms of their blood glucose in their body as an educational component. So, I'm fortunate I don't have diabetes, but, I wore one of these a couple weeks ago to see what the impact of food and different foods that I ate, and even the order of how you eat your foods can impact your blood glucose. So I think it's a very interesting educational tool, for those people that are pre-diabetic, particularly type 2, that if you do eat better, if you move more, and I like saying move more as opposed to exercise, because you don't have to exercise, you move more, walking, so there's if you eat and you go for a walk after you eat, your blood glucose will not go up as high. So you are better off. And I was able to run this simple experiment as I was wearing this device. One night I ate a meal and didn't, go for a walk afterwards. The next night I ate the same meal and went for a walk and was able to see the difference in my blood glucose. So it's fascinating. Whereas I know that, scientifically, like this is the impact of that walk. It was fascinating just to see it in real life in my body in that moment. So that's an awesome capability that I think more and more people are going to have access to understand the impact of food. In terms of capturing the biometric data, with the wearables, we can, the heart rate and all sorts of things now are capturable. Nutrition is sort of like that last piece. There's dozens of different, if not hundreds of applications for people to like track what they eat. And they're getting more advanced where you can take a picture and then that, the technology in a lot of cases using AI can be like, oh, that's a pizza. And this is, what the nutritional profile is to help you out. But tracking that information is cumbersome. It's not the greatest thing. So by using, the CEM devices, you don't necessarily need to know all of the specifics of that food, but you do know how it's impacting you. So I ate yogurt one day and it spiked up. The next day I put some protein powder in that yogurt and it, made a difference in how it impacted my body. So again, looking forward to, proliferation of CGM and for non-diabetic patients and what kind of impact it can make on the world. All sorts of technologies in terms of, training, physical activity, lactate thresholds and all sorts of things, which we won't get into. They're really specific to, athletes and things of that, or, they're probably the top 1% of people in the world, and these technologies that are going to get them to be that 0.1% of the world. Very useful if you're, Olympic level, athlete kind of thing. If you're the average Joe out there, training, it's interesting, but it's not going to really add value to your training experience. But the more and more, what's the other? Just so many thoughts are going through my head in terms of like this new technology. Brainwave technology and understanding what's going on in your brain, and when you talk about alpha and beta waves and different things like that, to just be able to relax you, so morning routine, it's good to sit there and meditate or pray, whatever works for you, but at calming moments,
Right.
take 10 minutes in the morning. It's a good practice. Well, there are technologies that can look at what's going on in your brain to see how you are relaxing. And then it sort of evolves to like, hey, can we do this without you were actually relaxing and just, so fascinating what technology is going to be coming and what we can do with it.
Absolutely. Now, coming back to, what you do currently, and you've been doing it for a long time, of course, RJ, at Estenda. Um, how things change from the traditional, let's say, you know, traditional healthcare systems like the EMRs, the EHRs, and these things. Now, like, are you seeing also from customizations perspective things moving directions as well? And here I'm I'm interested to know, because when I was preparing, I've checked on the website. I've seen like like you partner with some of the known big names in that domain. So you seeing these big guys usually following the trend, or are you seeing like more room for kind of new startups that they are coming up with like more creative, more innovative solution that fit the digital health solutions?
hmm Yeah, that was a great question, and it is a trend I've seen over the years, and it has probably made our lives a little more interesting from running a business perspective. But hospitals, health systems, large companies have definitely, I think of it as a shifting the risk. So where 20 years ago, there was probably a lot more of, this internal development. Let's try this. And it still definitely happens, and, we do plenty of business with plenty of different organizations. And, there's a huge market for what we do, globally kind of thing. But more and more, I do see this shift to let's work with a startup organization. So that's, and I think of it as shifting the risk, because that startup organization has now crafted the technology, created the, has done some testing kind of thing. And then you got to get into, run a pilot test it and, a health system in particular to see if it actually works. And so you have those partnerships and can run those pilot tests. So yeah, there definitely has been a shift over the last 20 years of like shifting that risk. More and more startups are being invited into healthcare systems to advance the science and capabilities of what people can do.
Anything that excites you? Have you seen any startup in this domain that is really exciting to you now?
There are so many startups out there. It's interesting because healthcare is also particularly challenging. Most of our experiences here in the US, we've done a few things over in the EU, but it's here with our private payer system. It's like always who's paying, and how are they, so you have one entity that might be paying it, but they're not actually using it. It's another group of people that's using it. So it makes healthcare a little more challenging. Sales cycles are really long, even, if you're that startup trying to get into an organization. So there's a lot of risk from that perspective. Just really excited to see what everybody's doing. You talked about the wearables. One of the things that wearables are making possible is the idea of care at home. As populations around the world are getting older and older, if your parents are getting older, my parents are getting close to 80, as they get older and they need a little more assistance, do they want to go to a nursing home or an assisted living facility, or do they want to stay at home where they're comfortable, where they're happy, where they're familiar with the environment? They'll have a much better quality of life there in that environment. So using the wearables in what's, the term care at home is really coming into its own. How do we use the power of technology to let them stay at home, but understand, what's going on with, like passive technology, put a camera, in the room. That's a little invasive, okay. It's like, hey, we can watch you. We can look in on you. That gets a little invasive. We'll now start using passive sensors and just understand, hey, my mother got out of bed this morning. She opened up a cabinet. I'm not sitting there watching her, but I am getting signals and using the power of AI to understand patterns of behavior over time It's like, okay, here's what my mother does every morning. She wakes up at 7 o'clock, gets out into the bed, brushes her teeth, starts the coffee machine, turns on the TV. Well, all of a sudden, those events don't happen. Signal, hey, call your care provider, your loved one. It's like, hey, check in on your mother. She's not following her usual pattern of behavior today. Hopefully there's a reason for that. But if there's not, you can intervene in that. So yeah, I think in terms of areas, like broadly, care at home, I think is a big up and coming area, and using the power of wearables and technology and AI and like bringing all those things together.
Absolutely, absolutely. RJ, like really, we talked a lot about many cool things today. As we are almost close to the end, any advice you want to give to, maybe younger generation that are now about to decide if they want to get into the healthcare digital technology sector? So, a couple of words, and then where people can find more about you and about Estenda.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and I started, our discussion today talking about that understanding of technology and people and process. And one of the things at Estenda we really emphasize is the idea of empathy, understanding the user. So anybody that's, coming into the field, whether it's on the health side, the technology side, the intersection of those two things, there's so much potential, so much opportunity, but you first really need to understand your user. There's so much information available. Like if you don't have diabetes, if you don't have congestive heart failure, you don't have multiple sclerosis, but maybe a family member does, and you want to help out with that particular condition. There's so much information available, one on the internet, videos to understand that, but talk to people, understand their situation to be able to develop the solutions. Sitting in your garage is not going to get you very far developing an effective healthcare solution. You really need to be out there and talking to the people. So yeah, empathy and understanding the users, hugely important in any industry, but definitely healthcare. How to find me? LinkedIn is by far the best. Search me out on LinkedIn or Estenda, our website, estenda.com, ESTENDA. Also later this year, I'm actually going out to TechCrunch conference out in California. I think it's like the end of October, depending on when this goes out. But I'm also at the HIT Lab convention in New York City in the first week of December. Great organization talking about all things digital health. So look forward to seeing everybody out there.
Cool. Again, RJ, thank you very much for this very informative episode today. You uncovered a lot of things related to healthcare, digital technology in general, especially when we discussed the AI, the wearables, the future also. So really, these are like really helpful, I would say, insights to the audience and people who are interested in that domain. So thank you very much for sharing that with us. You will find the links to RJ's LinkedIn and to the company in the show notes if you're listening to us on any podcasting app of your favorite. And if you are watching this on YouTube, you will be able also to see that in the description. And this is the way I end my episodes usually. If you just discovered this episode now, today, and you discovered this podcast, thank you for passing by. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did so, please give us a thumb up, subscribe, and share it with your friends and colleagues. And if you are one of the people who keep coming back, thank you for doing so. Thank you for being loyal to the show. I really appreciate all that. And as I say always, thank you very much for tuning in. We'll be again very soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Hit that subscribe button, share the show with your tech-savvy friends and fellow entrepreneurs, and leave us a review on your favorite podcast app. Your support means the world to us.